Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. You know, the United States was the world's superpower, both respected and feared. Wartime presidents like FDR, Eisenhower, and JFK said what they meant and meant what they said. Fast forward to the Obama administration. Clueless on the world stage, completely clueless on the war front. President Obama has no war strategy, a feckless and fickle foreign policy, and a paper tiger image, all the while threatening just about everybody and going after just about nobody, never meaning what he says or saying what he means. His policies are destroying our country, putting our troops in harm's way, and endangering America's security. His bloviating is creating ill will around the world. Pity the next president of the United States. Now, the skirmish hasn't even begun between Russia and Ukraine, yet President Obama runs out to a hastily arranged press conference last night to get in the middle of the fight, warning Russia that there will be costs for any Russian military intervention. Take a listen.
Indeed, the United States will stand with the international community in affirming that there will be costs for any military intervention in Ukraine.
Really, Mr. President? What are you going to do? Your red lines become pink lines, which in the end make us look completely yellow. And just this afternoon, Mr. President, you had a call with President Putin, where you told Putin that his actions would negatively impact Russia's standing in the international community. Seriously? You're worried about Russia's standing in the international community? Why don't you worry about your own, which is a mess? And by the way, who made you the world's cop? Being dictator in the United States doesn't make you king of the world. What is it about you? Is it your ego? You don't even have a dog in that fight. Don't you have enough to do here at home? You can't win a war, and yet you can't wait to get in the middle of someone else's. Come on now. Is it those war credentials that you earned fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan after dithering for months, deciding on a troop surge, and then telling the enemy your withdrawal date? It's clueless. Some military strategy, one apparently even you didn't believe, according to your then Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates. So why are you scrapping for a fight? For what? Your red lines, your threats, your foreign policy, it's all full of hot air. It's actually embarrassing. Now, you don't have a foreign policy, and everybody knows it. Have you already forgotten that you and hapless Hagel just announced this week you were reducing the size of the military to pre-World War II levels, while the rest of the world is on the march, increasing the size of their military? And by the way, what does a pre-World War II level mean? Everyone going to be flying around in a prop plane? Then for sure we'll never be able to protect our troops around the world, as in Benghazi. Hell, why not go back to F-Troop?
Drilling and fighting, get them down, they know their morale can't droop. As long as they all relax in town before they resume with a bang and a boom. F-Troop!
Clueless. And what's with hapless Hagel, one of two senators voting against sanctioning Iran, who's actually said on Al Jazeera the United States was the world bully? Who are you? And with the advancement of global terrorism, the black al-Qaeda flag flying over Fallujah in Iraq, with the hatred of America at an all-time high, with Russia aligned with Syria and Iran, you geniuses decide to make drastic cuts in the military? And what's with you and Putin? At least Putin got his parliament to give him permission to use troops in the Ukraine. Your own Congress wouldn't back you when you were dithering back and forth. You're in Syria, you're out of Syria, you're in, you're out. And you threatening Putin Isn't he the guy that you engage to broker a deal with Syria, relying on his credibility to tell you that Syria would eliminate its chemical weapons and therefore eliminate the need for your embarrassing limited strike? And speaking of Putin, you begged him to return that traitor Edward Snowden, you know, the one who told us the truth after your director of national intelligence, clueless Clapper, perjured himself and lied before Congress. And speaking of Syria, why did you wait for the blood of 100,000 innocent civilians to be spilled on the sands of Syria before you even threatened to act? Yet in Ukraine, they haven't even started the fighting and you want to get in the middle of it. By the way, aren't you supposed to be a pacifist? Did you forget you won the Nobel Peace Prize? Mr. President, everyone is laughing at us. You're like a schoolyard bully. No one's afraid of you. Putin sure as hell isn't. He knows you're no Eisenhower, no FDR, and no JFK. He's a former high-ranking KGB. He's got all the military credentials he needs. And what might your military credentials be, Mr. Commander-in-Chief? And that's my opening statement. With me now is former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense and Fox News national security analyst, my friend KT McFarland, and on the phone, Fox News military analyst, Colonel David Hunt. All right, KT, I mean, Putin has already moved the military into the Ukraine. To what end?
It's a done deal. I think he's taken and he seized Crimea, where they've got a Russian naval base, where there's a large ethnic Russian population, and he's taken what he's wanted. Now, Obama's talking, but Putin's taken. Now, what is this? This is part of his bigger scheme to recreate the greater Russia. So he's talked about the dissolution of the Soviet Union as being the greatest strategic disaster of the 20th century. So he sees his role as to take it back. 4 years ago, he took part of Georgia. He's now going to take the Crimea back, where he has a base. He's going to pressure a lot of the other countries in the region to welcome Russian basing rights. Russian military bases are going to be rebuilt in a lot of the former Soviet unions. And he's really removed himself from this little position, and he's assuming this new big position. His debut was the Olympics, and he's moving on to the Middle East.
Yeah, man, he made a left turn from that unity thing. Colonel Hunt, how do you see this unfolding militarily? Will the Ukraine fight? Will Russia stop, as KT says, at Crimea?
It's possible. I mean, the Russian, what Putin has done is mass divisions on the border, and KT is obviously correct. A lesson for this is what happened in Georgia, and Putin will crush the Ukraine. There'll be little ability to push back, and the Crimea will be lucky, or the Ukrainians will be lucky if they stop at Crimea.
But why Ukraine? What does Putin want there?
He wants attention. It's a landmass. There's oil and gas. He doesn't want it. They're already quasi-independent. Ukrainians want to go and join the EU. He won't let it happen. And he can't. He can't. So that's why you're finding this massing on the border, and the rest of the world has a little to no capability to stop it.
All right, and KT, I mean, do you see the United States acting militarily?
No, I don't think there's a military option. The only thing the United States could do is maybe economic. They could do an economic assistance to the Ukraine. The Ukraine's broke. They need $30 billion, and nobody's stepping up to lend it to them. We might be able to do some of that. Probably not a good idea, because the Ukrainian government has shown it's corrupt, it's incompetent. You could throw money at them, and it might just disappear. So the only people, interestingly, who've been offering the checkbook have been the Russians. They've offered to give them $15 billion. Billion, and not ask a whole lot of questions about whose pockets some of it's going in.
Colonel, is this about oil? Is it about a pipeline? Why Crimea?
It is about that, but it's also about territory. It's about Putin's image and Mother Russia's regaining, as Katie talked about, their prominence. But the brutality of what's going to happen. We've already seen about 70 people assassinated by Russian special forces and with the mobs. This now is a violent move into the Crimea to get it back. We've got units in Europe are not going to go anywhere near this. We don't have a strategic interest in this.
Why?
We don't have a strategic interest.
What do you mean by strategic interest? We don't have a dog in this fight. Oh, that's what I said. But what is the president bloviating about?
Well, his opinion, he's the only chance the world has, certainly without Europe's help, on making any dent in this, which will be little, is with U.S. leadership. And he's being pushed in that direction. But talking to Putin won't get anything done. We have no military threat to this. We're not going to move ships into the Black Sea. We're not moving submarines around. We put a lot of satellites around to look at it. There are no army divisions, military divisions going to make an approach on this.
So then, KT, you and the Colonel are agreeing on this. What is Obama bloviating about?
Yeah, I think he just doesn't like the idea that Putin's doing something.
Well, Putin is always one-upping him.
Always. He's kicking sand in his face at every opportunity. But I think that part of it is that Obama thinks that if he just makes a speech and he just says, don't do that, there'll be consequences, that somehow everybody's going to, we're going to run back and hide. It's almost like a parent telling the kid, you got to be home by 9 o'clock or else. And then there's never any punishment.
There's never an or else.
But for sure, the kid then stays out till midnight. And then before you know it, he's sneaking out in the middle of the night. That's what Putin is doing. Every single opportunity, whether it's in the Middle East. I mean, nobody noticed, for example, last week, while the Olympics were going on, Putin went back to Moscow, and the Egyptian leader, General al-Sisi, went to Moscow, and the two of them signed a deal. All of a sudden, with a few strokes of a pen, the Russians replaced the United States as a major strategic outside power in the Middle East.
And Colonel, what can we expect to see in the next couple of weeks? What do you think is going to be happening?
I think the Russians will get closer, will not leave until the noise calms down in Ukraine. So you'll see more movement of the military. We'll see some talk from us. It's a feckless idea. Ideas we're showing up with is to limit the travel of Russian politicians. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. So it'd be talk with little or no action except on the Russian side. And if Ukraine looks wrong, they'll crush them. It's, again, Georgia is a lesson in this. We don't be able to do anything about it.
Watch what happens with the natural gas. Russia controls natural gas to Ukraine and to all of Europe, Eastern Europe and Western Europe. If anybody starts getting too much out of line, Russia's going to shut that thing down so fast, they'll be shivering and in the dark. The other thing to watch.
So we're talking oil and pipelines.
We're talking energy.
Now we're getting to it.
And we're talking money. Who bails out Ukraine? Does Europe, does the United States, does the International Monetary Fund, or do the Russians?
All right. KT and Colonel Hunt, thanks so much for your insight on this.
You're welcome.
All right. And coming up, a Medal of Honor recipient pulls no punches in responding to the Obama administration's proposed military cuts.